Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. It's Kyle Henderson along with Mike Johnson. This is the Talk of Champions on BamaInsider.com. I hope you're having a great April. Mike Johnson, fresh off a marriage. Andrew Bone, fresh off a marriage. Man, how is married life, man? You still married, right?
Yeah, she's still sticking with me already through a couple of weeks, man. We're having a good time, but the background's different. People might notice we went ahead and knocked it all out and got married and moved into a new house, so a little new setting behind me, but happy as can be, man, and just rolling through some trips back and forth to Tuscaloosa and hanging out and just being married and trying to enjoy it.
All right, well, let's get right down to it. Alabama just finished their second scrimmage. I really wanted to highlight, to open up the show, the play of Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, coming into his junior season, I mean, he looks poised, he looks crisp. The veteran, obviously, of not only the offense but of the team. I've just been so impressed with him, and we really haven't highlighted him because I think it's almost a given. But how much, I wanted to open this up, how much of a relief and how much less pressure is Steve Sarkisian under coming into the season with a quarterback as dynamic as Tua, and how much is that easier for the entire offense?
Well, I think having a guy and have been around, and obviously Tua and a lot of these offense players have been around Steve Sarkisian dating back a couple of years ago. So I don't know if relief, but, listen, when I was at the scrimmage a couple of weeks ago and just see a Tua Tagovailoa, he's in command. I mean, he knows what everybody's doing. He's sending kids in motion. He's redirecting people. And, it's not that we didn't see that. And, it is kind of funny. We haven't talked about Tua Tagovailoa a ton, I think, because everybody spent last offseason talking so much about him that now, Jalen has moved on and now Tua's plugged in. But command, I think, is the right word for what I've seen from Tua Tagovailoa so far, and from what I've heard from other people. He, as if Tua couldn't mature anymore, it seems like he has matured more. And obviously, a very well-spoken kid, but he still is a young guy. And now he has started to develop into that older guy, and I think it's coming out in his game. From what I saw, just as crisp as I've ever seen Tua Tagovailoa, throwing dimes and being very, very accurate and doing all the things you get used to seeing him do. So there's no surprises, and I guess that doesn't make it very newsworthy, but Tua Tagovailoa set all these offensive records and passing records, and we saw him spin move and throw dimes, and it seems like so far from the people I've talked to, it's very much more the same. He seems very comfortable with Steve Sarkisian, and he has an embarrassment of riches out wide at the wide receiver position. So he's hitting a lot of guys, a lot of people getting involved in the passing game, and the protection's as good as it's ever been. So I think he's just very, very comfortable with everything going around him. And that's important when you're moving coordinators, but he seems very comfortable with Sark so far.
And if you're interested in the nuggets, I got some for you. I mean, on Saturday, Tua basically had a field day, hooked up with Henry Ruggs on a long touchdown pass. Jerry Jeudy took a screen pass, to the house, and then Jalen Waddle kind of did his thing. So you can read all the nuggets back at BamaInsider.com, of course. On the flip side, heard that some of the younger quarterbacks struggled a little bit, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Mike, because having the depth at quarterback, having the depth at every single position is something that Saban has talked about. Mack Jones struggled on Saturday. We heard he threw actually 4 interceptions. Talia also, there was times where he struggled. How concerning is this? And I know it's only April, but should Alabama fans be concerned with where the number 2, number 3 quarterbacks are right now?
Well, I don't think so. And I think you date back to last year, the spring game, to the 8A game when Mack Jones looked so good. And that gave me a layer of comfortability heading towards the season that, hey, you know what, if Jalen decides he wants to go elsewhere for this season, I think Mack Jones is a good option. He's one more year matured past that. I think he's very, very comfortable. Now, Saban alluded in his pressers at a couple of tipped balls, some other, kind of factors coming in, and then just states outright, you know what, some of them were bad throws. Some of them need to be better decisions. And I think, there is probably a part of Mack Jones that feels those younger, quarterbacks in that room. A guy like Tua Tagovailoa, as talented as he is, Mack Jones maybe steps into the scrimmage and says, hey, maybe I'm not as much of a game manager now. I know this offense. I know these players around me. Maybe I can take more shots downfield. And maybe that's where some of these errors did, occur this past weekend. But when I saw him, I was still very impressed with Mack Jones. I think that he knows the offense. Now, obviously, he's not Tua Tagovailoa. You're not going to ask him to be Tua Tagovailoa, but he's a very good quarterback still. And I think that, if you're talking to most Alabama fans and probably the Alabama coaches, they're still extremely comfortable with where the backup quarterback situation is. Talia is going to go through the season as well as, Bryant there, and they're going to be comfortable with everything they have going on. So Mack Jones, he stays put. I feel very good about where they're at because he's a guy that knows the system, very cerebral, and can make most of the throws out there.
Yeah, I think when I watch the quarterbacks at practices, I have been impressed with Mack Jones. And hearing Tua speak a couple weeks ago, he talked about Mack knowing the playbook inside and out and allowing him to play fast. I've seen a lot of positives from Talia, and I've also seen some positives from Paul Tyson. Paul Tyson does throw a good deep ball, so I'm eager to see those quarterbacks continue to emerge and interested to see what they can do on a larger stage come A-Day. You're listening to the Talk of Champions, or you're watching it right here on YouTube. You can call into the show. This isn't a call-in show per se, but the number is 205-686-3604. We will have another call-in show moving forward with Mike Johnson. You can call in and get your Alabama football-related questions. The staff is composed of Andrew Bone, who does recruiting, Tony Zukalis, who does our team writing, and I kind of wear a variety of hats right here. If you want to sponsor the show, keep things going for us, give me a call, 205-686-3604. Give me an email at kyle@bamainsider.com. Moving forward, Jedrick Wills suffered what Saban said was an ankle injury. He will have an MRI on Monday. Matt Womack steps in. I was curious. You're an offensive line guy, former All-American at Alabama, played with the Atlanta Falcons. What has stood out overall from the offensive line? Because you lost Jonah Williams, you lost Ross Pierce-Bacher, but new guys seem to be emerging. Even some of the younger guys that have enrolled early. Saban seems like he's really been happy with the offensive line play. Can you elaborate on what stood out from the offensive line?
Well, first and foremost, this is an absolutely massive offensive line unit. I mean, some of these guys would dwarf some NFL offensive lines, if you want me to be frank with you. I mean, some of the big fellas inside, Emil Ekiyor, who we've talked about a number of times, Chris Owens, big guy, second-teamer, true freshman, Evan Neal is an absolute monster up front. And it says everything you need to say about an offensive line when a guy like Jedrick Wills goes down, all SEC type performer, maybe the best run blocker in the SEC, for my money, and you put him in with a guy like Matt Womack and slide some guys around, and you're dealing with Matt Womack, who has started, 12, 13 games as a right tackle in the SEC. So I don't want to call it an embarrassment of riches. They still have a number of players that really need to come along. But when you talk about the physical side of it, you talk about the strength, you talk about the size, some of the things that usually come later, in a college kid's tenure, they're already there. I mean, 338, 335. Alex Leatherwood is doing his thing out there at left tackle. Matt Womack, an absolute monster. Standing next to him the other day, just an absolutely huge kid. And so I'm telling you right now, I always laugh about it. I go, man, I don't know if I would have started on some of these offensive lines at Alabama these days. Had a good run myself, but just big kids. And I think seeing those guys really, not to go too far into offensive line terminology, but to see those kids get hip to hip and driving out the same direction. Mm-hmm. When you get 335 and 340 and they're hip to hip and they're driving some of these defensive linemen off the ball, I think that's why we've probably had struggles with some of the defensive line units throughout spring so far. So just very, very impressive, particularly in the run blocking. They've been very good in pass blocking as well. So look forward to seeing what that unit can put together in the fall.
We keep on talking about freshman Evan Neal, 6'7", 360 pounds. He came on in as a 5-star, and he's really impressed both of us. We've talked about it again and again. One more time, what do you like about him? What stands out about Evan Neal as a true freshman, and could he play guard? Could he play tackle? Can you elaborate a little bit more on Evan Neal?
He can absolutely play guard, and at this point, from the people I've talked to, I'd be shocked if we don't see him get playing time at guard this year. And he's just an absolute physical specimen. And it's easy to say that. It seems like every guy we get into the Alabama program, you say, "Oh man, physical specimen," but he's more of a physical specimen than most of the physical specimens I've seen on the roster coming in as true freshmen. I think what's most impressive about him, and we've kind of talked about this before through some of the film, but getting to see him up close and personal last weekend, he plays with such a good base and such a good frame, and that's just very, very hard to do when you're a freshman. You're trying to roll these defensive linemen off the ball, and your feet come close together, and then somebody can swim move you out of the way, and you're falling on your face, and you're falling forward, and you're always on the ground. Nick Saban stresses not being on the ground in his practices, especially for offensive linemen. I'm sure that's something that Jedrick Wills was dealing with his ankle injury this past weekend. But Evan Neal, as big as he is, as young as he is, as much as he needs to learn the system right now, I didn't see him on the ground much when I was watching him in person. It's because he plays with a nice base. He plays in control. He plays with sideboards on because he's playing, guard positions, but extremely impressed with what he was able to put forward in such a short amount of time within this program. And I think he's only going to get better for the foreseeable future.
Staying on offense, I want to talk about Nagi Harris. I mean, clearly, an early season beast mode, looks more lean, crisp. I love watching him work with Charles Huff, the new running backs coach. You got Brian Robinson, you got Jerome Ford. But let's stay on Nagi for a second. What has stood out about Nagi, and what do you like about his overall style of play?
Well, I think when you talked about Nagi coming in as a freshman a couple of years ago, obviously a very talented guy. And any young running back will tell you the one thing they struggle with most is probably being patient in terms of blocking. But some of the plays that I was able to watch with Nagi Harris, and I'm not going to give away obviously too much information. I don't want Saban knocking on my door, but I was very, very impressed with his patience, and I think it's something we saw a little bit of him last year, but didn't get to see as many carries with Josh Jacobs and Damian kind of taking over certain games. But very, very patient, allowing some of these bigger offensive linemen we just talked about to get in front of him and throw blocks. And I think when you have a big body like that, and you have a bunch of 340-pound offensive linemen falling forward, and then your running backs 230, and he's falling forward, you're going to gain ground. And it's just, the ability to set up those runs, understand where your keys are, understand where your blocks are flying, understand where what the offensive line is trying to get done, understand what their aiming points are. Some of the tougher things we went through when I was in college was, maybe I'm attacking the outside shoulder of the defender, and the running back thinks I'm attacking the inside shoulder. He ducks in, and then he should be going outside. So Nagi Harris is definitely well seasoned at this point. And I, for one, and I'm not trying to get everybody too riled up, this kid is going to have an incredible season behind this offense line. Just from everything I saw last weekend, a specimen playing behind specimen, and Tua's in the backfield next to him, man. He's got all the weapons pointed in the right direction to be able to have something really special going on this year.
We've talked about Jerome Ford, and I know he had a big scrimmage, the first scrimmage, but Brian Robinson, I mean, I watched him the other day. They had an indoor practice, and whenever Alabama has an indoor practice during our availability, we're right up with the running backs. Brian Robinson is jacked. I mean, the dude has some guns, and he runs well. Is he capable of doing something special at Alabama? I know a lot of people are excited. They don't lose patience on him, right? I mean, Brian Robinson can clearly carry the torch.
Oh, there's no doubt about it in my mind. And listen, he is – I don't even want to call him a poor man's Nagi Harris. They're very similar, in my opinion, in their running style. And you hate to call him a poor man's because it sounds derogatory. He's really not. I mean, it's kind of 1A and 1B from what I've seen from them from a physical standpoint. So, I don't think there's any doubt that he's going to plug right in. You've had some very, very special running backs in front of him, including Nagi Harris for the past couple of years. But Nick Saban has said time and time again, and everybody's heard it as well as myself, that he is very, very happy with the 1-2 punch at running back right now. And Brian Robinson, and I say this to you all the time and everybody on the show, when you look at special teams, that is a very, very big key to who Nick Saban feels confident about and that will contribute in the near future. I talked about Ali Cahill last year playing a little special teams. Brian Robinson's one of those guys that's been lined up at returner, last year, and you see him continue to do that this year so far. And I think that tells you all you need to know. Nick Saban very, very happy with the skill set of Brian Robinson. I saw him catch the ball very well, seems to have very good hands. Excited to see what he can do out of the backfield. But I got to tell you, if you're an opposing defense and Nagi Harris leaves the game and Brian Robinson comes trotting in, you're going to be like, where do they keep getting these guys at, man? It's pretty unbelievable the amount of talent they've got in that backfield.
And staying on the running back, Saban continues to allude that there's usually always a freshman who contributes. Now, Jerome Ford could be that freshman. He redshirted last year. He's a redshirt freshman. But you also have Trey Sanders coming in and Killian Robinson. It looks like Killian Robinson might have had some surgery, so I don't know too much on Robinson. But I want to ask about Trey Sanders, and you said this earlier. There's always a running back that can bring another element, and I'm curious to see if Sanders can provide that when he comes in during the summertime. But it seems to me that Saban really likes and is kind of like saying, watch for Trey Sanders when he gets to Alabama.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, when you have a guy that is that good, I mean, Trey Sanders was, a highly recruited guy for very obvious reasons because he's got that combination of size and speed. I think Nick Saban's very, very excited about what he's going to see in Trey Sanders, but until he gets here, we don't know. Can he block on third downs? Can he catch the ball out of the backfield? Can he learn the schemes? Like I was talking about, can he learn the blocking schemes in front of him and really know how to set things up? And like I said, I'm not going to go too far into what I saw last weekend. I don't want Nick Saban or one of those guys beating down my door, but I think Jerome Ford's another guy, like you said, that can step into that role and play at a very, very high level out of the backfield. Seemed to really, really grasp what was going on. So between those two guys, I'm very confident, especially with that offensive line, that Bama will find somebody serviceable in that third and fourth string running back role. I think that, like I said, if Trey Sanders shows up and then all of a sudden you're starting to see him on special teams and he's doing some of the dynamic things and he's learning his blocking assignments first and foremost, then I think you'll see him contribute. He just the packages like that don't come along very often. Very, very, very much like Nagi Harris a couple years ago. Man, how is Nagi Harris going to get in this running back rotation? He found himself a role, particularly down the stretch because he's such a big guy. He has that runaway, breakaway speed, can break tackles, and that's what Nick Saban likes. So Nick Saban's probably looking at this ground game as well as some of the other offensive coaches saying, man, can't wait to get that guy here.
He's Mike Johnson. My name is Kyle Henderson. You're watching the Talk of Champions right here on BamaInsider.com. All the coverage back on Bama Insider. And if you want the premium nuggets, if you want to get behind that paywall, simply go to Bama Insider, look for the sign up. The promo at checkout is simply Roll Tide. Coming to you on April 7th after Alabama's second scrimmage. We got a ton of nuggets from the scrimmage. We got some great write-ups and, of course, the Nick Saban Press Conference. He went on a mini rant yesterday. He had some interesting comments regarding players leaving early for the NFL. I guess that's maybe for another time, right, Mike? Today we're just talking about kind of what we've seen from the first 12 practices from Alabama and now jumping to the defensive side of the ball. DJ Dell is a name that has certainly stood out. Saban said that he's been repping with the ones. Mike, does this surprise you? I mean, he's another early enrollee who we didn't really talk too much about. A lot of people were talking about Antonio Alfano, and he's probably going to get his. But DJ Dell cutting his teeth early on, does that surprise you?
I don't think it does. And this is, to me, this is Nick Saban. This is the defensive side of Nick Saban saying we need to get back to the Alabama factor. And I think that obviously, a lot of people think very highly of Tavita Musika, the late signee from a year ago. I think he's still a guy that can play. But when I look at DJ Dale being inserted, I think this is Nick Saban saying, hey, we can be multiple. You can move, Fidarian Mathis around. You can move LeBron Ray around. You can move a lot of these guys in and out. That's the beauty of the 3-4 scheme when you switch to the 4-down lineman. But DJ Dale, from everything I've seen, everybody I've talked to, I did see some of him last weekend. He's multifaceted, and you don't see that very much when you talk about young defensive linemen. Some of them come in, they can rush the passer. Some of them come in, they can take on double teams. I thought he was pretty multifaceted when I saw him, and I think when you look at his athleticism, I know Andrew Bone was very high on him coming out of high school, the whole way. So I got to give Andrew Bone credit there, and it kind of made me open my eyes because I'm boys with Bone. I was texting him going, hey, what's this kid all about? And Bone's, hey, man, I'm telling you, this kid is the real deal. So hearing that he's inserted, to me, the first thing that clicked in my mind was this is Nick Saban wanting to go back to the Bama factor. Mm-hmm. We've got to be able to stop the run games from these opposing teams first and foremost. And I think that you had questions, at the end of last year about stopping the run with Quinnen Williams gone. I think you're starting to alleviate those things. Nick Saban's saying, hey, we can be multiple. We can move guys in and out. But if you can plug up double teams and get into the backfield and wreak havoc, I think you're a guy that's going to play. And at this point, I got to tell you, I think this says more about DJ Dale than it does about any of the other defensive linemen not getting the job done. I think he's just that good that Nick Saban feels good about putting him in the lineup. I
wanted to also ask you about this. So Antonio Alfano, a player who everyone's excited about, and this happens with a lot of freshmen who jump on and they have this, the status of 5-star, 4-star, whatever it is. And as soon as they don't earn the number 2 spot, the number 1 spot as an early freshman, a lot of fans are sometimes quick to write them off. I mean, why is it important for fans to be patient and let these players develop? I mean, they've been here for a couple months, but everyone develops at a different pace. And just because Antonio Alfano specifically isn't playing with the 1s or 2s doesn't mean he's a bust by any means, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think, honestly, as Alabama fans, we get a little bit, comfortable with the fact that our coaches, and Nick Saban particularly, are better at developing players than any other coach in the country. I mean, you see the numbers when you go to the NFL draft and you see the 5-star guys and you see guys getting drafted in the first round. So you see a guy like Alfano come in and you say, oh, man, what could possibly be going on? Well, let me tell you what's possibly going on. And this is the craziness with early enrollees that you didn't have back 10, 15 years ago when I was coming into school. These guys are coming in early. He's not only trying to learn a new football scheme, this guy's learning a whole new life. I mean, he's coming in, he's completely changed where he lives. He's coming to the South dealing with humidity for the first time. He's getting involved with Scott Cochran's program. So when you unleash him and tell him to rush the passer and he's really good in one-on-ones, or you see a highlight clip of him, facing an offensive lineman, that's great. That tells you the potential's there. But guess what he's doing out on the football field? It's 2nd down and 8. Man, maybe they're going to run a draw here. Maybe they're going to run a screen here. Maybe I've got to be on the watch for this. I can't let the quarterback get outside the pocket. So now he's thinking. It's not just one-on-one. He's not just reacting. Now he's thinking. And really the development comes along when you get guys to play without thinking so much. And he's going to get there. I promise you. I've seen Antonio Alfano. I've seen him move around. I know what kind of specimen he is. I think a lot of people had questions about Iabi Anoma last year, around the same type of things. Let me tell you something. I saw Anoma last weekend. The kid gets it. He's not thinking very much anymore. He was absolutely incredible. So Alfano's going to get there, and it's just one of those things that you didn't used to have, and now you got early enrollees that are adjusting to a completely new football team, completely new environment, and maybe some are slower than others, but he's going to be just fine, I promise you.
While you brought up Anoma, I have to slide this in. The new coaching staff, I got respect for all of them. I've been enjoying, watching their coaching styles, their new philosophies being implemented with these guys. But Sal Sunseri, my goodness, I mean, he just brings it, right? I mean, how important is it for Alabama's defense to have Sal back in the fold, back on the defensive room? I mean, clearly he has an incredible wealth of knowledge. His vocabulary, he spits it. And so how important is it for Alabama to have Sal back with the Crimson Tide?
Well, I think it's perfect that he is so good at coaching edge rushers because he's got an edge. It was so funny. And I'll just lay this out there for you. Let me lay the canvas. I'm in there. I'm chatting it up with some old people. I'm talking to some of my old coaches in the, inside of Bryant Denny, which is pretty much empty. There's just a few people in there, maybe a couple of thousand people in there. And all the way from like 80 yards away, I'm like, oh my God, that's Sal Sunseri. And I start looking around, and there he is 80 yards away just chewing in somebody's butt. And I'm like, That's Sal Sunseri right there. Like, that's exactly what I know of Sal. I can't tell you how much pride as an offensive lineman you would take when you'd see your boy lock one of his players down, or you would lock one of his players down, and he would just start chewing in their butt. And that's the guy he is. He brings that edge, just like I was talking about, that edge rushers need. He brings a nastiness. And listen, everybody can talk about coaching philosophies, yelling, and helping a guy along. Sal Sunseri is going to make sure he gets the most out of every player, even when they're young. Even when their head's swimming, guess what? They're having to deal with him too, and they're so much better for it in the long run. I have so much respect for what he is as a coach. I thought Florida, when he was at Florida, really gained a good one. I think Alabama, with him coming back, and both of his sons, by the way, 2 good kids. Yeah. I think they've gained a good one as well.
Yeah, you're right. You have Tino out there working with the quarterbacks, and then you have Vinny Sunseri also in the defensive room. So quality family, glad to see them back with the Crimson Tide. As we move closer to A-Day next week, believe it or not, are there any questions still around this defensive unit, maybe at the inside linebacker position? You have Dylan, who's obviously going to be the signal caller and who's looked great and received plenty of compliments from Saban. Are we still looking at a position battle there, or are there any other questions on the defensive side heading into A-Day?
Well, I think you're going to look right up the middle of the defense when you're asking questions, and obviously there's some spots that are not settled with DJ Dale cracking the rotation. You see some movement there. I thought Joshua McMillan was pretty good when I saw him, and I think that he can serve in that role. But there are questions. What are you going to get out of him? What are you going to get out of some of the backup guys? I mean, when you talk about who's plugging in behind Dylan Moses and possibly Joshua McMillan, what are you going to see? Who are you going to get? Do you have run stuffers? Do you have guys that can cover in pass protection? Are you going to have to change the defensive scheme if one of those guys gets hurt, where you're maybe rolling down a star position more often or bringing a safety down into the box? So right up the middle of that defense. And Nick Saban, listen, he said you got to get back to the Alabama factor. First of all, on defense, that starts with stopping the run, like we talked about earlier. So right up the middle, can you plug it up? Can you take on these elite offensive lines, especially when you get to the Georgias of the world, who are going to be very good up front? Clemson's going to continue to be good up front. Oklahoma, who you might see again if you get that far. Oklahoma's going to be very, very good up front, and possibly Jalen Hurts having to deal with him doesn't sound like a very, very good day. So those guys up the middle, just the depth at the inside linebacker position and the depth right up front on the defensive line, to me, are the biggest question marks moving forward for this football team. And I think that Nick Saban would probably agree with me in that assessment.
As we look at the secondary, still sticking with the defense and kind of rounding out the edge of the show, Xavier McKinney and Jared Maiden clearly have looked fantastic this spring. I've been a big fan of Xavier McKinney and certainly balled out last year and shown that leadership this year entering the 2019 season. How important is that for the defense overall to have that veteran leadership, especially in the secondary?
Yeah, when I look at Xavier McKinney, the word rangy comes to mind. He's very, very rangy. It reminds me of my old teammate Mark Barron back there as a young guy playing the safety position. Just it didn't seem like a quarterback could throw the ball in a line hard enough to keep him from getting sideline to sideline and making plays. And Jared Maiden, some sort of in the same role, a little bit more the enforcer from when I saw him last weekend. I mean, out hunting heads. I mean, just absolutely trying to demolish the offensive players last weekend. And I was very, very impressed with Jared Maiden. So I think very, very good hands. When you look at the safety position, I think that both those guys kind of fit nicely together where you have one that's rangy, another one the enforcer, then you start rolling the safeties, playing one or two of those guys in the box. Not concerned at all, to be honest with you. And I think that both those guys fit in very well with what Nick Saban likes in his safeties. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and try to break down route schemes and those guys coming up, but they were very, very good, and as good as you can be going up against an offense led by Tua Tagovailoa and that wide receiver core. But they're gonna make a lot of heads turn this year with what they're able to do back there at the back end.
All right, as we round out the end of the show, everybody knows about the offense, who's returning, and there's some questions on the defense, but things are getting filled out. The special teams game is something that we always get questions about, particularly with the kickers. You have Will Reichard, who's come in as an early enrollee. You have Joseph Bolova still on. Mike Bernier, who was a punter last year, who took the job from Skylar DeLong, has entered the NCAA transfer portal. Should Alabama fans be more confident in the kicking game? Is it too early to tell? Are we going to find out on A-Day, or do we have to wait all the way until the Duke game? What is your early assessment of the kicking game, Mike?
I'd love to tell you that everybody can calm down and everybody can be good, but listen, man, recent history has shown myself and all Alabama fans too much to say, hey, we're going to feel good about this in April. It ain't going to happen. It's one of those things that having guys that are capable of it is one thing, but having those guys actually go out on the field and do it and produce at a high level, each kick lives its own life. It's not like blocking or running the football where you get into a rhythm. Those guys, maybe they do get into a rhythm, but it's hard to tell from that in April. So my head is still spinning a little bit, and I know some of those guys are working very, very hard to be able to get it done and be able to get it pointed in the right direction. It's just not a question. I think we're going to get answered. Not even until the Duke game. I think once you get past Duke, you maybe string together 4 or 5 good field goals in a row from 40 yards plus. Then I think you know what you have moving forward in the kicking game. But there are going to be questions at punter. There's going to be questions at kicker. It's an annual conversation around the Alabama program. It definitely is. So I don't think this year is going to be any different. And I'll be holding my breath with the rest of the Alabama nation.
Fantastic job as always, Mike. Mike is our football analyst for the springtime on BamaInsider.com. You're watching the Talk of Champions right here on our BamaInsider.com YouTube channel. My name is Kyle Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we've had a good spring. There's still plenty of coverage to come. We're going to have a couple more opportunities to watch the football team this week, and then we're going to have tons of A-Day coverage. We'll visit with Mike a couple times before then and after A-Day as well, as we go into the long summer season before that Duke game. But it's been great. Congratulations again, Mike, on your marriage. Same to Andrew Bone. And, you can find all the coverage back at BamaInsider.com if you're curious. As I always say, to get behind that premium paywall, head on over to BamaInsider.com. Look for the free 30-day trial. The promo code at checkout is simply Roll Tide. From beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and from beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, this is the Talk of Champions right here on BamaInsider.com. Have a beautiful Sunday with your family, and we'll catch you soon on BamaInsider.com.